When it comes to mastering a skill like painting, you've probably heard it all. Deliberate practice, the 10,000-hour rule, daily painting, you name it. And when I first started teaching, this is exactly what I focused on. I worked with my students to make sure that we had a clear objective. We identified clear technical gaps between their current paintings and their desired paintings, and I had them put in time with exercises that helped them to target their specific weaknesses one by one so they could progress in a way that would be faster and easier to measure. And it worked. I had students getting awards in competitions like the Jerry's Artorama self-portrait competition, or even Bold Brush. They'd host their first openings with their work, or go from booking commissions to selling their original paintings. But I started to notice something else too. My students, and I, were tired. I'd hear artists lament that while they were proud of what they were accomplishing, they kind of missed the days when they were just painting whatever they wanted after work for fun. It wasn't because they liked that work better or they wanted to keep painting at that level that they used to be at. It's that they had previously thought of painting as a fun thing to do to enrich their daily routines, and now they treated it like a professional. And being a professional means work, and that work can be tedious. At first, I helped students work through this on a case-by-case basis, but it seemed like a bit of a one-off when it would happen. But after giving the same sort of advice for the dozenth or so time, I realized this needed to be factored into the process. And I'm not alone in this. Recently, I was reading Adam Grant's book, Hidden Potential, which is all about the science of achieving great things. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll know this is exactly my jam. I love understanding the intersection of painting with the psychology of mastering a craft. My university background is in psychology, and so learning exactly how world-renowned musicians honed their skills or how athletes went from amateur to the Olympic podium is something I love to geek out about and apply to painting. But one chapter of this book for me that is covered in highlighter marks and post-it notes is the chapter on what Grant calls deliberate play. And this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about this essential ingredient that I now consider probably the most important aspect to any artist's roadmap in reaching their painting goals. This is a concept I have put front and center in my own practice and that I've built into my students' journeys as well, so that all of us will not only paint great paintings, but we will love the process so much that we are going to stick with it long enough to really paint the way we want to paint. So, what is deliberate play, and why do we need it? To become truly great at anything, it's going to require time. The proverbial 10,000-hour rule persists for a reason. While 10,000 hours may be oversimplified, or there may be important variations person to person or discipline to discipline, no one is just born good at these kinds of things. Even famous child prodigies like Mozart had a pretty darn grueling practice schedule as a child. And so I want to use this to really highlight that time is going to be necessary no matter who you are. But it's not just enough to put in the time either. A young Mozart could have sat down at his instrument for hours a day just making noise, and that wouldn't have amounted to much. The fact that his father was an accomplished musician and teacher himself mattered. It ensured that his practice hours actually added up to clear results. This is why I talk so much on my channel about having a clear goal for your paintings from the get-go. Because if you don't have a clear way to visualize what you want to paint, it's going to be tough to build your practice hours to actually get you to where you want to be. Once we know what that goal is, the next best way to set yourself up for success is to have an expert in your corner, a coach or a mentor who can pull on their experience and knowledge to give you the exact exercises that you need to make the improvements you need to make. These two steps are where I focus my attention for so long, because after all, once you have this, well, all you gotta do is put in the reps, right? Well, yeah, when I talk to the artists I look up to and admire, I realize they did indeed put in the work. They did painstaking cast drawing after cast drawing to master proportion, or master copies to understand technique and brushwork, or weekly figure drawing to understand anatomy for years, or countless black and white studies to improve their values. These painters usually had a daily routine like that for years, where the work they made wasn't the work that they're known for now. It's probably not even work they sold. But that work and those drills built up their skills to get them to where they are now. So again, I come back to that question. All you need is that deliberate practice, right? Well, as Grant comments in his book, quote, "We're often told that if we want to develop our skills, we need to push ourselves through long hours of monotonous practice. But the best way to unlock hidden potential isn't to suffer through the daily grind, is to transform the daily grind into a source of daily joy. It's not a coincidence that in music, the term for practice is play." This quote made me realize that when I thought of the painters that I look up to, there was another ingredient that I was missing. Painting is often their default hobby in addition to being their job. They'd sooner pull up a chair to their easel than they would pull up a chair to watch a football game. Or if their friends came over, they'd invite them to chat while modeling for a painting. Or perhaps invite their friends to paint along with them. That isn't to say that their lives are one note or that they don't have outside interests, but that they see painting not just as a job, but as fun, as something you would do for fun. This is so important because I may have said this 1,000 times on my channel, but it bears repeating. The perfect plan to get great at painting does not matter if you aren't motivated to actually paint, which means we have to enjoy it. We have to have fun. So how do we cultivate a sense of play in our art studios? We need to start by making sure that we reset the balance of your practice so you stop being overworked but understimulated. This means being more intentional with the time that you put in, so you're focused on quality over quantity of your practice. But it also means that we figure out ways to make rote skills like drawing practice or color mixing fun instead of tedious. The result of this is that you should think of your painting time as something you look forward to because you enjoy the process of improving rather than something that you should put in time with because you can't wait to reach the end goal. Once we keep that in mind, we can get clear on the types of deliberate play that work best for you as a painter. Here are just some ideas for deliberate play that my students and I put to use for our own painting practices. So when painting with other artists, especially when we're painting the same subject, personally, I get really fired up. And I will actually challenge myself to try and get my block-in established with the fewest brushstrokes of any of the painters there, while still being the most accurate. Or I'll challenge myself to create the block-in that's the most beautiful, or establish an accurate block-in fastest so I can be the first person to move into color. Alright, so sometimes these kind of challenges I give myself lead me to rush, but you'll notice that my emphasis on any of these little challenges still includes accuracy. And intentional brushwork means that if I'm actively pushing myself to slow down and be more thoughtful about every mark, so that even if I signed the painting and stopped working when it was still in the block-in phase, I would still come away with a beautiful painting. This kind of mitigates that tendency to rush. I find that this actually works very well for me. I'm typically not a competitive person. I will not play like dodgeball for fun, or I don't even like a lot of board game nights or anything like that. But if you put me in a room with other painters who are at about my level, I will absolutely thrive from wanting to excel and, show myself off to the people I respect as much as possible. That being said, this isn't going to be everyone. So if this is you, and you really want to give yourself a sort of challenge or game to play if you're painting alone, I'm going to use an example from my student Michael. So Michael plays a game when painting where he competes against his past self rather than other people by checking his block-in to see how many errors he can spot before he moves on into color. There are always drawing adjustments that have to happen, but he notices that when he forces himself to look for errors and guess what he's going to see when he uses another tool to double check his drawing, he started making fewer and fewer mistakes over time, and he corrects his mistakes more quickly and more easily. He commented that this really helps him to enjoy the process rather than focus on a perfect end product on any given painting. And the results have absolutely shown up in his progress because he has been learning and improving so quickly. Other ways that you can potentially compete against yourself or your past self would look like asking how many chances you need to accurately mix your paint to match a paint chip from the hardware store. This is great because you can put your paint mixture right on the paint chip to see exactly how close you got. If the first time you do this exercise, it takes you maybe 5 or 10 attempts to actually get the color spot on, but then the next time you realize, it only took you 4 attempts. And maybe the time after that, you are doing it in 2 attempts, to the point where after playing this game with yourself over and over, time after time, you actually can start getting it in just 1 or 2 guesses consistently. Man, that's what we want out of this kind of play. And it might seem like just a game that you're playing with yourself, but the reality is that you can take that color matching skill and apply it to your paintings so that you're less likely to get mud and you're more likely to get exactly the kind of nuanced, sophisticated color that you need for a piece. Another challenge that you can give yourself is how complete can you make your painting look without moving beyond big shapes and just 2 values? Or how few brushstrokes can you use to create a painting that still looks complete and beautiful? This is really great for painters who want to paint more loosely, by the way. It could look like brainstorming how to compose a painting that looks like it could have been made by one of your favorite painters, and collaging together this plan to actually test your theory. So not necessarily painting your own composition that's inspired by that artist, but actually taking photos that collage together the elements so that you actually practice composing these images and you score yourself on how close you think this comes to the kind of composition they would make. I find this kind of game is way more effective than learning and memorizing arbitrary composition rules. And I think play can also be just about letting loose and ditching the structure every now and then too. Like asking yourself how not to compose the kind of painting that looks like your favorite painter could have made it. Or how many ways can you imagine not to start a painting that would look like your favorite painter made it? It could look like painting fan art, like I'm doing for this portrait of Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3. It could be trying something wacky, like challenging yourself to paint a portrait with only your non-dominant hand, or using the strangest 2 colors on your palette as the only 2 colors for that painting. Or even something simple, like trying a new medium for fun, or going back and doing the sorts of painting exercises that you used to do after work before you got serious about reaching your painting goals. It could look like painting with friends for fun without getting competitive about it like I did in my earlier example. And one thing I actually ask all of my students to do now is to take note of painting exercises that just feel fun for them and keep a running list of these. That way, if they start to feel burnt out or bored, they can shift gears proactively and rekindle the spark with that exercise. But ideally, the more we treat the rest of our work like play, the less these reset activities will be needed because the entire process should be fun by definition. So one sort of caveat that I want to spell out here that Grant spelled out in Hidden Potential is that these activities are not the same as gamification, which is where you are adding, quote, bells and whistles to something that's intrinsically tedious. Deliberate play, as I understand it from his book, isn't about making tasks that you dread tolerable all of a sudden, or being able to, quote, push through the pain, as Grant puts it. It's about rebuilding the task from the ground up to make it fun from the get-go, without losing what the task is actually designed to teach you. And when we can do that for every skill we need to hone in a painting, that's when the magic happens. We don't want to find a way to make one kind of painting really fun so that we can ignore how boring things like bark drawings can be or how painstaking master copies can be. We want to identify the exact skills that we need to practice, probably some combination of composition, drawing, value, color, and brushwork, and then figure out how to practice each one in a way that builds you up to the specific kind of skills you need to have to paint the way you want to paint, but that's also really fun. If you want help building this into your painting practice so that you can become undeniably good at painting, proud of what you make, and respected as an artist, even though you might have come to painting later in life than many of the artists you admire, I want to hear from you. In case you haven't noticed, I love putting together these plans and helping you to get the big results because I geek out about this. Like, it's just a big puzzle. The first thing that we would do is get on a free Zoom call to discuss your goals and see if I can help you reach them. And from there, I'll build out a game plan for you. And if it's a fit, we can talk about working together so that you get all the way to your goal. To get started, all you need to do is check out the link in the description to apply and save your call slot. And I want to hear from you too. So what ideas do you have for deliberate play with painting that you would recommend that I add to this list? Let me know in the comments so I can try them out and maybe even share them in my next video. Until then, happy painting.